What's up, YouTube? Alright. As yesterday was the Super Bowl, Seahawks won. I was really pleased that they finally got their first Super Bowl victory. There's a game called Yeovil on Facebook, which is going to close down. A lot of people there said the Broncos would win. No. They didn't win. The Seahawks beat them. But, oh well. I'm here to review a movie. Football movie as of yesterday was the Super Bowl. And I'm going to post up my other videos from the Super Bowl today that I took last night. I'm going to post them up today while I review. And I'm going to review Necessary Roughness. Okay, so you start off with a guy called Paul Blake throwing footballs down at his farm. He threw one and he's like, blue 32, set, hut, and he's got an amazing throwing hand. Then later he's thrown, and then they go to Coach Gennaro, played by Hector Islado, who Scott Bakula is Paul Blake in this movie, and then Coach Gennaro was offered coaching football, and he didn't want to, but then he decided to do it, and then Robert Loggia played Coach Riggendorf, and then both of them were hanging out, and he said, "Good to see you, Wally. I thought you'd be pleased, the two of us working together again." That's what Coach Gennaro said, and Wally Riggendorf, that's Robert Loggia, said, "Why in the hell should I be pleased? I was coaching, I got an offer to coach my own football team," and he said, "Coaching high school football in London doesn't count, Wally. And I just had to teach one hygiene class." And he said, "Which is something you know nothing about." That's what Coach Gennaro said to Coach Riggendorf. And then they were getting a team together, and then they had this quarterback named Popkey who wasn't really good. He threw a ball, and he always missed at everything because he'd hit people in the back of the head. He'd throw and people would drop, or he'd throw it, obviously, and he said, "Thought you were going to do one of these." And Coach Riggendorf was the defense, and Coach Gennaro was the offense coach, and he said, "How about that? He stinks at two sports." And he said, and then Coach Gennaro said, "I can work with him. Just put out my offense. Will you, Wally?" And he said, "Build an offense with a guy who throws like Edward Scissorhands. You play a hell of a lot of defense." So then he went to the farm and met Paul Blake and said, or saw Paul Blake, and he said, "Paul Blake, I'm looking for Paul Blake." And he said, "Guess you don't remember me." He said, "Yeah, I remember you, Coach Riggendorf." And he said, "Guess I made a decent impression of you." And he said, Paul Blake was like, "Yeah, you were out here 16 years ago recruiting for Penn State, something state." And this movie takes place in Texas, I think. It was part of Texas. Yeah, and then he told him, "How's the magic arm?" And Paul Blake is 34 years old, and he wants to get him into college. Coach Riggendorf does, and he says, 34 years old, haven't thrown a football in years." And he said, and then he said, "That's good, then it's resting." And then he said, "I'm not asking you for something. I want you to come out and play with the team," something like that. And he said, "Team? You don't have a team, coach. You're dragging people's out and throwing them to the wolves. Expect me to come out and get the shit kicked out of me? The hell's that going to prove?" Then he said, "I never saw anyone throw the ball the way you did." And then everyone was like practicing. Popke wasn't doing good, but then Paul Blake stopped his car and came over, and he met the Dean Elias, something funny, Dean Elias, Dean Elias said something like this. Coach Gennaro's like, Dean Elias! He said, someone who hates football, you spend a lot of time watching the sport. And he said, eternal vigilance is the price of integrity, Coach Gennaro. And Coach Rigendorf is like, what an asshole. Call him an asshole? Yeah, because he is. I'll get to that later. And then Paul Blake comes with his cigarette, and then Wally looks over and smiles because he got Paul to come, and he says, Dean Elias, your office said I'd find you here. My registration. You done with this? Because he saw a cup of water, and he said, yes, thank you. I was, and then he put out his cigarette. That's probably gotta be one of the best parts of the movie. Me and my brother laughed our asses off in that movie. And my brother is a fan of Scott Bakula, who's like in Star Trek movies, I think, or some kind of future movie. Yeah, some stuff when he goes into the future. I hope to check those out. And then, this is what Coach Gennaro said. Wally, did you hire assistant coach without telling me? No, I got your quarterback without telling you. He said, Wally, well, I hope he gets younger as he gets closer. And he said, hey, just give it a look, will you please? And he said, Blake, tattoo somebody. And went, hey, over here. And went, let's go, Banks, move it. And then Paul threw it to Charlie Banks, and Charlie Banks caught it and fell down. The throw was so powerful. And then Paul, Charlie Banks was in, I forgot what his name is, but he was in that Christmas movie I reviewed, I'll Be Home for Christmas, because he was the one who thought he ran over Santa. Charlie Banks was actually left off the roster the year before, but he never gave up. And then Paul Blake comes in and says, hey, is 209 West this way? And they said, who's your kid? Maybe I know him. And Paul's like, not looking for my kid, I'm looking for my room. And she's like, whoa, a 40-year-old freshman? And they said, yeah, maybe he knew Elvis. And then he came into his room that he shared with Manu, and he says, come in. When he knocks on the door, and he says, hi, Paul Blake. Looks like we're going to be roommates. Lake mana mana. Lake mana mana to you too. No, Mr. Blake, that's my name. Other people in my family are very, very large. And then he said, I'm called Lake mana mana. And he said, want something? Maybe something comfortable wear, something like that. And he said, what's with all the attention? Where I come from, Mr. Blake, we're taught to respect our elders. And he said, yeah, well, I'm not that old. Alright? And then he said, he tried to climb up onto the bed and he got pushed up. And he said, thanks. And he said, sure. Paul Blake had to actually bathe in Epsom salt because when he was running, everyone was passing him. And then earlier he got hit in the head by a racquetball from one of the teachers. And then she tried to do something, or she thought he taught athletics because he said he was in the Department of Athletics and he was sore right around here. Like right here. That's where I usually get sore if I have to pull on my dog because my dog always pulls on the leash. Alright. So then they're practicing the next day. And then Paul Blake is passing this guy called Featherstone. And he'd catch, and Featherstone would always drop the ball. He'd drop. Then he caught it with the face mask. So he said, again. Good, better. That's better. Then they got a samurai who was beating up all the players. And they said, and Wally's like, works for me. Because he's like a samurai. Then later, Paul Blake then there was a a little Australian kid. They said, "Where are your pads from, Where are your pads, Mackenzie?" "I have no pads for me, coach. In Australian rules, the people wear pads. In Australian rules, the only people who wear pads are the ref and the spectator. Trust me." And he said, "You have to take your price." And he did it. He held on to the ball without even having shoulder pads and all that. And then Paul had to go to class, and they said, "Here, the lecture's going to cover everything, or there'll be a lot of outside reading." And Paul Blake's like, "How should I know?" And they said, "Well, aren't you the prof..." And Mackenzie went, No, sweetheart, that's not the prof. That's the bloody quarterback." And then they went, "Morning, Mr. Blake. Morning, Mr. Blake." And she said, "You don't teach athletics?" That's what Suzanne said. And he said, "I don't think I ever used the term word teach." And then he came up to her, and then he went and sat down, and she went, "Why don't you go have a seat, Mr. He went, "Blake. Paul Blake." Then they went to, he was in Sinbad's class. Sinbad was called Andre in this one, and he told Andre that they needed him. They missed him, and he had a year of eligibility to play football. So he said, "I want you to eat raw meat." And then later, it was Sinbad later, said Andre does not eat raw meat because Andre is a vegetarian. And Coach Rigendorf is like, "Eat whatever the hell you want, Andre." Because he told Charlie Banks to eat raw meat, but then Andre said Andre does not eat raw meat because Andre is a vegetarian. "Eat whatever the hell you want, Andre." And then they moved on. Later the first game, Paul Blake's handing off. Everyone's missing the assignment. Nothing's working, so then Paul screws it. Throws the ball. Man, does he go far. And they said, "Freshman Paul Blake is the only armadillo alive when the..." And he said, "By the way, freshman Paul Blake is the only Dillo who was alive when the Beatles were still together," something like that. And then they were all playing everything together. They were trying to... So he threw the ball, and man, it went far. Featherstone was running. Featherstone was actually pretty fast, the guy who couldn't catch. They said, "He's got a cannon." They're like, "He goes deep." Oh, the announcer was named Chuck, and he was played by... Rob Schneider. Yeah, and he's in a lot of Adam Sandler movies. And then he said... "Let's go." And then they benched Paul Blake. They threw Popke in, and then the guys got a touchdown. The other team did, and one guy was barking, and they went, "Hey, high school, rough, rough, rough," and Sebastian was like, "Ooh, bad doggy," or "Bad dog breath, bad dog," or "Ooh, doggy breath, bad doggy," something like that. And then they went all down the field throwing, it was crazy. And then Popke got the ball and went, "Blue 45, set, hot, hot," and he hid behind the ref and said, "Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, blow the whistle," and he got tackled. And then Rob Schneider went like that and just looked in disbelief. And then he said, "And for some reason, Paul Blake has not come back into the game yet." And that's when Suzanne turned off the radio. Okay, so what happened next was they were all playing, and then they were all talking about how they were playing the game, and then Paul Blake wrote his, and then they said, sure, he had a great view from the bench. I'm going to skip some of this. Later, they were playing games more, and they weren't winning any games at all. And that's why the cover of this movie says, the biggest bunch of losers to ever become winners. So I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I'm just going to skip some because some of this stuff is just, just running around, practice and everything. And then Mackenzie's the kicker and he can't kick that good. So then later they're 0-8. And one time Rob Schneider went, shit! Because he wants the Armadillos to win. So then later they go to a bar, and there's the number 1 Texas Colts. And went, Jason Bateman, Edison went, hey, Andre, look who's here. Flat Top. And Andre started to smile, and he said, guys, see who's here? And he said, Texas Skate. This is what Flat Top said. Texas State. By golly, the pussies ain't won a game yet. And then Sarge went, well, if it isn't the by God number 1 Texas Colts. And then Jason Bateman went, wow. And he said, you say something, Sugar, or something? And he said, no, I didn't say. And they pushed him down, and he said, he went, hey, anyone here okay? He said, you okay? Yeah. Well, Paul, he's all talk about Flat Top. And he said, party's over, guys. You know that. And you know that, too. What are you thinking about? And then Flat Top said, if I wanted a big brother, I want to kill mine. And they went, oh, and he said, hey, you don't want to mess with us. We're nobodies. You guys are undefeated. You're 8-0. We'll just take our party somewhere else. And then he said, tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to buy you a beer. Forget this whole little incident never happened. It's on me. And then Flat Top poured it on Paul Blake, and he said, now it's on you. Guess you want a light beer, huh? And he said, because he pushed Paul Blake too. And then that's when Manu got out of his seat, and some people were getting there ready to attack if something happened. So then he said, guess you want light beer, huh? On second thought, maybe you better buy me a keg, or better yet, put a spigot in that fat Buddha about, what's that guy's name? Manu. And then he says, easy. We're getting along so good, and you had to go and ruin it by insulting my center. And he went, this is my throwing hand here. Then he's like, ha! Ha! The second punch he delivered was much more powerful, but it didn't work. And he went, shit! And he tried to punch him again, and then he threw him over the counter, and then they went, hey, he bought you a beer! And then Flat Top punched Jason Bateman, and then he punched the sergeant, then Sinbad kicked him and then hit him like that, and then he got thrown over the table by Popkey's friends, Flat Top's friends. He kicked Flat Top and then hit him like that, and then he got hit with a chair, thrown over the counter. He said, you alright? Oh, I'm doing great, other than getting hit with a chair. And Manu was taking people and throwing them, beating the crap out of them. And then there's a samurai. He kicked the guy. He kicked one, punched one. He's like, ha! Ha! And then he kicked a few more times, and then he pulled back his shirt and punched him and bowed. And then everyone was like fighting. It was going on and on. Featherstone was punching people, and then Popkey went, yeah! And he went, hey, Popkey, you finally threw something that connected. And then he went, yeah. And then Sinbad said, next time we invite you to hang with the boys, keep your white butt at home. And he said, I thought you wanted to party. And then they started laughing, and then they went and fought even more, and then they came, and then Sarge got thrown outside, and then I think the sheriff came, and then he went, and then he fell unconscious. And the sheriff was called for Billy Bob's because there was a big fight, and then he came, but there wasn't a brawl. And Dean Elias heard about it, and he went like that. He went, yeah. Earlier, he and Coach Gennaro, they said, I won't be putting you in for season tickets when he's talking with everyone, and then, then you get to the chase. You don't know what's going on. Alright. So, then the fight was over, and he said, Blake, that's what Coach Gennaro said. And his name's Ed. He said, what? He said, who threw the first punch? Then later, he went over to Suzanne's house and he found out who Suzanne was. She was a cheerleader of another team that Paul Blake played against. He threw five touchdowns in one game against the team she was for, and she thought they would win, but because they said they had a real chance, but Blake threw 5 touchdowns. And he said, are you telling me this is all about a grudge? And he said, a grudge? No, I cut your picture out of the sports page. I made my girlfriends drive past your house. I used to call your house and hang up. I was nuts about you. And then later, Coach Rigendorf got a girl to join the team, Kathy Ireland. And then they went, Mackenzie, the Australian dude, went, ooh-wee, Sarge, look at that. They're putting a bloody Sheila on the team. And Sarge is like, we'll be the laughing stock of college football. I think that's what he said. And they said, what do you think we are now? And then they snapped the ball. Not right now. I'm reviewing a movie. Sorry for the inconvenience. Where was I? Oh yeah. So we got to them kicking she was kicking a football. She kicked about 40, 50 yards with the soccer ball. I said, don't even think about it. Wally, wrong gender. There's nothing in the books that says a woman can't play college football. Come on. He said, now Wally. And she said, hey Rig, is that what you wanted? Then that's when Mackenzie started talking, and then Manu couldn't snap the ball. I think he had the hots for Kathy Ireland, and then he snapped him the ball. She said, relax, big man, you've already got the job. And then she kicked 20 yards or something, and then he said, nice kick, and she said, it's a little off, and then she kicked again, and it was even farther. And they said, ooh, you kidding me? That's what what's his name said. Mackenzie said, oh, you kidding me? And then they said, that's the pressure TV, man. That's what happened with wrestling. Women take over the sport. What's his name said that? Sinbad said that, and then Andre, that is, and then he kicked 40 yards. They said, man, that was 40 yards. How long? How far was that? 40 yards. And they're like, now, can you believe that? That's what Mackenzie said, can you believe that? And then they said, and then Ed's like, Ed Gennaro said, I don't even drive that far. And then they went on, and Blake almost got a touchdown, but then they said, it's a fumble. And then they said, tough break. I think Blake could have scored. And then they went, let's see who's going to come up with it. And he said, Mackenzie comes up with it. The little Australian rugger. And then they did an idea. They got Kathy Ireland in, Lucy, to kick 3 points. And one guy said, hey, Sugar. He called her Sugar and said something and said, is that the only way you can score? And Manu went, "Shut up, or you anger me." And then she kicked it. They tied, and then he came over and tackled her and went, "Welcome to football." And then Manu tried to run over there and said, "You will die." And this is funny. Kathy Ireland got up and said, "Welcome to football." And she kicked him in the nuts, and he went, "Oh! Oh!" And he's like, "Mama!" or something like that. And they said, "She can take care of herself." And they said, "Yo, man, we tied!" And then they all cheered and everything. Next, they all moved and had a party. Then, what's his name? They all were getting gifts from boosters, and Ed said, "This is how it all ends. This team will not accept gifts from boosters. Take the jackets off." And he said, "Coach, this is a private party." And then Edison said, Dad, can you just butt out of this one?" And he said, "We'll talk later." And then everyone was going. Then they said, then he was being harsh on the kids, and he said, "They're just kids, Coach." And he said, "I know that, Blake. I was expecting more from you." He said, "It's not about me. It's not about that. It's not about me. It's not about them either. Although it should be." And he said, "This is about you trying to prove something to the world. Why can't you relax and let these kids feel good for 5 minutes?" Something like that. And he said, "I can't do that, and neither can you. Now, what you get through your head, Blake? High school is over. You want to grow up? You have to grow up," or something like that. And he said, "And what happened on that field tonight doesn't change the rules." And he said, "Rules? You know what you can do with your fucking rules?" And he said, What? And then he said, pardon my language, but that's what he said. "You know what you can... Rules? You know what you can do with your fucking rules?" And then he walked off, and he said, Coach Wally came in the middle and said, knock it off. Someone's going to get hurt. Just go on home." And he said, "That's a hell of a good idea, Coach. In fact, I quit." And then he said, "Snap that pretty hard, Ed." And he said, "You snapped that pretty wide, Ed." "No, Wally, I did what I had to." "No, shit. They're my team. They're my team, too, and they're good kids. You dug a ball in front of everyone." "You're wrong, Ed. You are wrong." Then later, Paul drove off the campus, and then he and Charlie Edison came with him because his dad owned everything, and he had 2 cheerleaders doing his homework, and then he got everything figured out. He had 2 cheerleaders doing his homework, and he said that if he wasn't going to pass, his dad was just going to buy him another grade. So then, Andre took him to go study. And then he said, "Edison's studying with Andre. We're going to have to practice without him." And he said, "You're not worried about Saturday? He doesn't pass the midterms, or he doesn't pass the midterm session. He's out." Something like that. Then he says, "And then if he doesn't pass, he's out. And we know the team will do whatever it takes to back him up." And then he says, "Go ahead, it's your team." And then Wally said, "Go for it." And then he went to the team, and they were all cheering to have Paul back. He did not quit, in fact. And then they took all the tests, and they said, "So, what'd you get?" And then what's his name? Edison went, I got a C." And he said, "Hey, you passed." And then the whole team clapped. They're like, "Yeah." And then congratulated him. And then Dean Elias wanted to take a look at the grades, but he's being a cheap shotter. And then everyone thinks Ed's getting sick and having a heart attack, so he went to the hospital, and then they gave Wally the bigger whistle, and then he gave it to him, and then he was going to be coaching. He said, I'm head coach now, and then, yes, you play against Flat Top. So, no, that didn't go so good. So, like the second play, Texas Armadillos are already scoring. They're scoring the 55 pop keys, like, no, fuck. Sorry. Flat Top's like, I'm gonna rip your fat head off, old man. Whole night. Gonna wear you out. And he kept on sacking Paul, and they said, that's a blitz. Watch it. And he says, number 55, throw a block on him. And he said, hit somebody there. That's what Rigendorf said. And then he said, number 55, throw a block on him. And he says, I'm going to kill you. You're mine. Green 25. Green 25. Set. Hut. Blue 32. Blue 32. Set. Hut. And you get tackled all the time. And then he said, at halftime it was 21-0. So Wally's like, we're losing 21-0. He said, a double. And then he said, Mackenzie, you got it. And then he's talking to the whole team. Now, Lyman, come on now. You got to give Blake longer than 4 seconds to throw the football. Now let's analyze what's been working here. And he said, not a GD, God, D word, has been working for us. This GD suit for me. Or this GD suit. This GD shirt. And this stinking tie. And this GD shirt. It doesn't work for me. He plays like a rampaging beast. And that's the way you gotta do it. You go out there, you tear the fucking heads off, and you shit down the next thing. He said, let us pray. Sorry, I said that guy. Jesus. But, yeah. Because I am a Christian, so I don't like to swear as much, but sometimes I do. And then they were playing, and then he said, then he got the team down. Then Edison scored a touchdown. Then Lucy kicked the extra point. But then they found out that Ed had indigestion, so he got out of the hospital. Then they said something, and then Featherstone said, whoa. Hey, man, they've seen the game films. They know you're never going to throw to me, and I'm wide open. I'll catch it. And they're like, and they're like, And then they went, Featherstone's off to the races. And they said, don't throw it to Stonehands. And then Blake threw the ball, and he said, he's wide open. That's nothing new. Can he catch the ball? And he caught it, and they said, he caught it. OMG, Featherstone caught the ball. It's a touchdown. It's 21-13. Excuse me. And then ball was going back and forth, and then Andre said, boy, me and you gonna party. And then he tackled him, and then the ball popped loose, and then Manu came up with it, and Manu sacked the quarterback. But what was actually funnier, before Andre did that, they threw the samurai in, and they said, this is you, baby, this is you. And he said, you must show us some respect. And then he came, jumped and kicked, and then he kicked one player, and then kicked another one in the face mask twice, and then punched him. And he said, how could the ref call that? It was a clean kick to the face mask. And my brother said, I don't think that's legal. Yeah, which is illegal to kick another player. Can't really kick. Yeah, you can do a few things, though. But then they went over there. So they were playing more. Alright. Now here's where it really gets interesting. Here's where the whole thing gets a little bit more interesting. So they ran. They were playing even more. Harder. They were, throwing, and then they got the ball, and then he threw it to Featherstone. Featherstone caught it. Okay. You're very close. They were very close. Featherstone got tackled in the end. He's fast. He's really fast. Because he ran the hurdles, and He ran the hurdles in 13 flat. And then they went. He was throwing incomplete pass. They were so close to getting to the end zone. But then Paul Blake was really injured. He was bleeding everywhere. And then here's where it goes. They're not winning at all. They're like down by 7 points. And then they did everything. Here's where it really gets interesting. So he gives the ball to Edison, and then Edison throws the ball. And then Blake was in the end zone and he caught the ball. Because they said, quarterback option, are you nuts? It'll never work. It's a gimmick play. You said it'll never work. You said so yourself. And he said, Blake isn't through. He's got juice left. And he said, pop key, send it in. And they said, how many timeouts do we have? 3. You use them all now? And then he says, let me make you a promise. You get to that end zone, you're not going to feel any pain. Got that? Oh, yeah. And then he said, what kind of play again? He said, how? Oh yeah, I remember. So they said they go for the tie or the win. It's your call, Wally. So he was going to fake a tie and go for the win instead. So then everyone's getting coverage. They covered Featherstone because he caught the ball more than once. And he caught the ball twice. And then, what's his name had just been attacked by Flat Top, Charlie Banks. And then Charlie Banks ran into the end zone and Manu said, they said, keep him off my ass. And Popke actually blocked someone. He just went like that and knocked him over. And then, what's his name? Manu said, Mr. Blake, they'll never touch you. And then they went like that. And then they went, there's an open man in the end zone. It's Charlie Banks. And he was getting ready to throw. So he threw, and right as Flat Top came to tackle him, Manu just ran right in front of him, tackled Flat Top, and Flat Top was dripping blood out of his mouth. Banks caught the ball. And they went like that because Paul Blake threw him the 2-point conversion where they won by 1 point. That's why it says the biggest bunch of losers to ever become winners. Everyone's cheering. Paul Blake, Coach Gennaro, Riggendorf, Charlie Banks. Charlie Banks took off his football helmet and went like that. And then, what's his name? Paul Blake. Not Paul Blake. The coach, Rob Schneider was celebrating with champagne, spitting it out or something, pouring it down his shirt. And Dean Elias got fired. Actually, something I forgot to mention, Dean Elias got the Armadillos to play with a bunch of convicts, like people who broke the law. Yeah, and then he laughed because he hated the Armadillos, and then he got fired, and then the Armadillo thing pulled out a gun to him and pointed it at his head. Well, that basically sums it up. I think Suzanne Carter, she and Paul Blake shared a kiss in this movie more, and then they celebrated. Yeah. So, overall, check this movie out. It's funny. I found out about it because of the top 10 football movies, and then looked at it, and I thought about watching it, and I didn't find it. I couldn't find a watchable one, and then I found it, and then I bought it. I think 6 months after I watched it. I watched it in March or April and bought it in September, so 5 or 6 months after. That's all for right now. I get a 7, 8, 9 to 10 out of 10, maybe even 10 out of 10. It's funny. It's good. Alright, So anyway, stay up to date and subscribe. Alright. Bye. Peace.